This happened a few months ago. I'm Cora, a 32-year-old freelance photographer. I often dive into urban exploration for photography. I've seen many abandoned places, but the Larson Textile Mill was different. Something about it felt alive. I wanted to capture something special for my portfolio, but I've never stopped thinking about that day since. When I first stepped inside, it was quiet. Just me and the creeping shadows. My footsteps echoed against the walls. Light filtered through broken windows, casting eerie patterns on the floor. I was excited and started shooting pictures of the peeling paint. It looked haunted, like it had stories to tell. I thought I saw something move, but when I looked, it was just a trick of the light. I shook it off and kept shooting. On another visit, the atmosphere changed. It was chilly and the air felt thick. As I walked farther into the mill, I heard footsteps behind me. I froze. My heart raced. I turned around, but there was nothing but shadows and dust. Maybe I just imagined it? I took a deep breath and pushed the feeling aside. When I returned again, the place felt more unsettling. I wandered down narrow hallways, snapping photos of rusted machines. Then I noticed a shadow dart behind a pillar. I blinked, thinking it was my imagination, but a dread settled in my stomach. It felt like I was being watched. I wanted to leave, but part of me needed to get that perfect shot. I found a room filled with old photographs stuck to the walls. Faces stared back at me, frozen in time. A chill ran down my spine. I snapped pictures, trying to shake off the unease. Suddenly, I heard my name. It was soft, like a whisper. Cora. I froze, uncertain I really heard it. I called out, "Hello?" Silence. The air felt heavier. I spotted a crinkled newspaper on the ground. It detailed stories of a skinwalker, a creature that could take the form of animals or people. My mind raced as I read. The locals had warned of sightings near the mill. I glanced around, fear washed over me. Then I saw it at the end of the hallway. A figure. I couldn't make out details, but it stood still. My breath quickened. I called out, but it didn't move. I backed away slowly, my camera shaking in my grip. The figure seemed to shift, but my mind was screaming for me to run. When I got home, I replayed everything in my mind. I wasn't sure what I had seen. Maybe it was just my imagination. But the feeling of being watched, it haunted me. The mill was not just a building anymore. It felt full of life, something waiting in the dark. I know I should stay away, but the pull to return is strong. What if it's calling for me? The next week I found myself at the Larson Textile Mill again. I told myself it was for the sake of art, but deep down, I knew it was the pull of curiosity and fear. I couldn't shake the feeling that something awaited me inside. As I stepped through the threshold, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot echoed in the silent mill. The air felt different this time. It seemed electric, charged with anticipation. I held my breath and let my senses scan the room. I wanted to capture a photograph that could tell the stories my heart felt. I decided to explore further into the mill's depths. The narrow hallways twisted like a maze, and a sense of dread crawled along my spine. But I pushed forward. I needed to see what secrets lay beyond the next corner. The photographs I'd taken before felt incomplete, as if there was a gap longing to be filled. As I entered an old processing room, I felt that familiar chill wash over me. I focused the camera on the faded machinery, but something caught my eye in the corner. A reflection? I turned quickly but saw only a wall. The shadows danced in peculiar shapes, almost as if they were alive. I shook my head, pretending it was just the light playing tricks. Then I heard it again. My name. Cora. This time it was louder, more distinct. I spun around, my heart pounding. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence enveloped me. It felt like the very walls were breathing, holding their breath as they waited. Despite the urge to flee, I felt a compulsion to uncover the source of the voice. I stepped further into the room, my camera gripped tightly in my hand. I scanned the walls, looking for the source of the whispers. Then I spotted something on the floor, a dusty old mirror half buried under debris. Without thinking, I picked it up. As I wiped the grime away, the reflection started to change. I didn't see my image. Instead, it morphed into a figure, one that resembled the shadow I had seen before, wearing a dark expression. I dropped the mirror, my heart racing. Shards scattered across the concrete, reflecting bits of light and shadow, chaos all around me. Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me again, this time heavier. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Panic bubbled in my chest. The air felt heavier, pressing down like I was in quicksand. A voice, low and menacing, whispered, "Cora, stay." Chills ran down my spine. I could not ignore it, and I found myself backing up against the wall. It felt like the shadows were closing in. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but I was rooted to the spot. I felt trapped between the past and whatever awaited me in the dark. In that moment, I realized I couldn't just leave the mill to its silence. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I took a deep breath and turned on my camera's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the corners of the room. It was then that I saw something move, quick and fleeting, a figure darting into the hallway. I wanted to run, but my feet couldn't budge. That's when I saw it, the figure standing just at the edge of the light, staring back at me. All I could do was freeze. I couldn't tell if it was human or something else entirely, and in that moment, I knew I had stepped far beyond curiosity. Something dark was calling me deeper into the mill. The silence was heavy with threats, and I realized I had no idea what I was truly facing. My heart thudded in my chest and my breath quickened. I didn't even know what I was looking at. The figure near the edge of the light seemed to shimmer, as if it were made of smoke, yet it retained a human-like shape. I felt the urge to scream, but I couldn't. I was too paralyzed by the uncanny stillness. Then it moved, gliding silently toward me. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. I kept the camera pointed at it, peering through the lens as if it could shield me from whatever I was witnessing. But all it did was amplify my anxiety, making the shadows appear darker and the figure clearer. "Cora," it said again, and this time I recognized the voice. It was softer but held an unmistakable weight. I staggered back, knocking into some old barrels. They clanged, echoing throughout the room. My own noise startled the figure, and for a brief second its face became clearer. It looked familiar. Too familiar. I narrowed my eyes, trying to make sense of it. It reminded me of someone from my childhood, someone long gone. The shock rattled me. "No, it can't be," I whispered. The memories rushed in, her laughter, her kindness, and the last goodbye that still haunted me. "Stay," it whispered again, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. No, I didn't want to stay. I wanted to escape. But as I turned, the hallway loomed dark and unwelcoming. "Who are you?" I gasped, spinning back, hoping the figure would answer. Instead, it tilted its head and took another step forward. "Cora, help me," it said, a plea laced with fear. I couldn't process what was happening. I felt trapped, caught between the familiar and the unknown, paralyzed by confusion and urgency. I couldn't think straight. I needed to leave, yet something pulled me in. "Help you with what?" I stammered, as the figure remained eerily calm. As I held my camera tightly, searching for answers, I noticed a new shadow creeping along. This one was different, darker, creeping through the hall. My instincts kicked in, driving the fear deep into my gut. I held the camera out in front of me like a shield, even as my body screamed to get out. "Cora," the figure whispered again, and in an instant the new shadow lunged. I snapped the shutter reflexively, blinding the darkness with flash. I barely registered what I saw before everything became chaos. The flashes created bursts of light that illuminated terrifying shapes. More figures emerging from the corners of the room, the air thickening with whispers. Then everything went dark. The camera slipped from my fingers and I tried to find my bearings in the pitch blackness. Panic surged within me, overwhelming my senses. The voices rose and fell like a storm, drowning out my thoughts. "Help me," I heard again, fighting to hold on to a thread of sanity. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped my arm. I flinched, ready to fight, but there was no escape. I understood then. Whatever awaited me here was tied to my past, and the darkness was not merely a shadow. It held the weight of my regrets. I finally managed to pull free, stumbling backward, but then I hit the wall. A new voice echoed, deep, husky, and filled with a menacing tone. "Cora," it growled, shaking the very foundation of my resolve. With no choice but to respond to the unseen threat, I scrambled toward the only path I could see. But what lay ahead was shrouded in mystery, and the weight of the unknown dragged me back to the shadows, compelling me to stay one last time. My breath came in quick, shallow gasps as I tried to gather my thoughts. I couldn't linger here, not when shadows danced around me, pulsing with a life of their own. I turned and ran, my feet slapping against the hard floor, not caring where I was headed. I felt like a marionette, strings cut, flailing for direction. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead of me, a corridor into a darkness that felt alive. I glanced back just in time to see the figure, the one that had whispered my name, growing distant, its features fading into the murky shadows. Another wave of dread washed over me. I didn't know if it was advancing or retreating. The husky voice returned, rich with malice. "Cora, you can't escape." It echoed, crashing against the walls and reverberating in my core. The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening as if it were trying to choke me. I pushed on, darting through the darkness, weaving between crates and broken furniture. Then I heard something else, faint scuttling sounds. They came from the walls, above me, behind me. A swarm of whispers filled my ears, some angry, some pleading. "Help me," echoed from every corner, blending together like a twisted choir. I clutched my camera tightly, unsure if it held any power left. I entered what felt like a larger space, lit only by the faint glimmer of moonlight penetrating the cracked windows. My feet stopped moving as I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight of old newspaper clippings plastered on the walls. They were yellowed and torn, headlines screaming of tragedy, loss, and the impossible. Disappearance of locals in abandoned building. The words blurred into one another, distorted by fear. My gaze lifted to the center of the room where a solitary chair stood, facing away from me. I recognized it. The same old wooden seat from my childhood home. My heart sank. It was where we used to talk late at night about dreams and fears. A wave of longing surged through me, and I stepped closer, but the pull was sinister. "Cora," the figure's voice returned, softer now but filled with urgency. "You have to understand. They are waiting." My pulse quickened again. I couldn't trust these voices. Shadows morphed before my eyes, creating stilted forms that seemed to gather around the chair, whispering my name. I couldn't see their faces, but I felt their sorrow, a sorrow that merged with my own regrets. I needed to leave. The chair felt like a trap, a place that would bind me to this torment forever. Just as I turned to escape, I felt a chill race down my spine. The noise stopped. Everything went eerily quiet. My eyes widened, and I turned back into the room. That's when I saw it. A reflection moving in the dim light. Tears threatened to spill as clarity dawned on me. There, outside the far window, stood a figure resembling the one from my past. My breath hitched in my throat. It was watching. Not just watching, but beckoning me, hands extended. I needed to know what it wanted, but I also knew I had to escape. As panic clawed at my chest, the walls began to close in. I could feel the shadows creeping, drawing closer. I spun on my heel, ready to flee, but my legs felt heavy, my decisions clouded. The last piercing words echoed in the silence, chilling me to the bone. "Help me, or it will be too late." I turned away from the window, heart racing, and shoved my hands into my pockets to keep them from shaking. I had to get out before whatever was happening pulled me deeper. I raced back through the cluttered room, glancing around wildly, looking for any exit aside from the way I came in. The scuttling sounds returned, louder this time, more urgent. It felt like the walls themselves were breathing in and out, a mocking rhythm that mirrored my growing panic. I pushed through the doorway and into the hallway again, but it was darker now, more oppressive. Shadows loomed and swirled, darting just out of my line of sight. I had no idea where I was going. Suddenly a loud crash echoed behind me. I froze. My heart pounded as I turned back. Someone had fallen. I peered into the darkness, straining to see. "Hello?" I called, my voice weak and trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered, thick and suffocating. I took a deep breath and stumbled into the dim light spilling from a half-open door to my right. I pushed it wide and stepped inside, hoping to find some semblance of safety. The room was filled with what looked like furniture draped in white sheets, old abandoned relics. As I hesitated, something caught my eye. A dusty mirror hung on the wall, reflecting a distorted version of my own wide-eyed expression. Before I could look away, a shadow flickered behind me in the reflection. I spun around, panic gripping my throat. Nothing but the empty room. I cursed myself for letting my imagination run wild. But when I faced the mirror again, it shifted, revealing a flash of movement just outside the door. I stepped cautiously backward, heart pounding. I needed to get out, yet the shadows seemed to whisper my name, drawing me back into their depths. Then I felt it, a cold hand brushing against my arm. I screamed and jolted, spinning around again, but found only the empty hallway. The room buzzed with noise around me, the air thickening as if something was trying to seep in. Just as I started to back toward the exit, I stumbled across an old photograph on the floor. I paused, lifting it carefully. It was faded, but the faces were familiar. They were the same people from the newspaper clippings, ghostly smiles frozen in time, missing posters of joy before the darkness took them. I dropped the photo, horrified. The whispers turned into a chant growing louder. "Cora, Cora, come back." I recognized the voice again. It was pleading now, layered with sorrow and desperation. I shook my head, fighting against the terror that threatened to paralyze me. I dashed through the door, into another darkened corridor, and that's when I saw the figure again, the one beckoning to me from the window. But this time it was within reach, standing at the intersection of the hall. The face, still shrouded in shadow, loomed closer, an amalgamation of familiarity and dread. I couldn't determine if I was moving toward it or if it was moving toward me. My instincts screamed at me to flee. I turned and ran, fear propelling me forward. Each heavy footfall thudded in my ears, urging me to escape this nightmare, but every direction seemed like a trap. As I rounded a corner, I collided with something solid. I gasped and looked up to find a pair of hollow eyes staring back at me, eyes that were both familiar and utterly terrifying. "Help me," it whispered, voice echoing my own fears back at me. "Help us all." My chest tightened as I stared into those hollow eyes. I felt like I was staring at my own reflection, but twisted into something nightmarish. "Who are you?" I managed to croak out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you see? You're just like us," the figure said, its head tilted slightly, revealing more of its gaunt face. It felt wrong, as if it were wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. "You must help us. You don't belong here." A surge of anger mixed with fear rose within me. "Help you? I don't even know what's going on." I stepped back, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The shadows seemed to dance, closing in on me. The figure extended a hand, its fingers long and claw-like. "You've already begun. Finish what you started." It pointed to something behind me. I turned, momentarily distracted, but the moment I did, the figure lunged forward, vanishing into the dark. I stumbled backward, my breath hitching in my throat. The echo of its voice coursed through me. "Finish what you started." I shook my head, trying to clear the lingering dread. I didn't start anything, did I? I had just wanted to escape. I took off again, bolting down the corridor, desperate for an exit. The walls loomed closer, the air pressing down like a weight on my chest. I pushed through door after door, each one revealing empty rooms that only added to my confusion. Then I tripped over something on the floor. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my knee. I looked up and my heart sank. It was the photograph again, the faded faces smiling hollowly at me. They felt like they were urging me back, a reminder of the terror I was trying to flee. The whispers came again, intertwining with the chants. "Cora, you must return to us." I couldn't understand their meaning, but it felt like a dark invitation, a trap set for me to fall into. I picked up the photo, clutching it tightly in my hand. Out of the corner of my eye I saw movement. A shadow slipped past the doorframe, quick and sleek. I rose to my feet, adrenaline kicking in. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. But the silence answered me once again, thick and unnerving. I squinted into the hallway, less sure of my surroundings with every flicker of light. That's when I saw it. A dark shape loomed beyond the door to my left. It shifted, revealing a taller figure draped in a cloak that blended with the shadows. My blood ran cold. "You cannot escape," it hissed, and a chill ran down my spine. Panic surged. I rushed down the hall, but the figure was closer now. I could feel its presence. Each footfall echoed, a reminder that I was not alone. I burst through the next door, praying it led somewhere safe, when the room beyond seemed to swallow the light around me. "Cora!" a voice shouted. My heart froze. I recognized that voice. It belonged to someone I thought I'd left behind. "No, get away from me!" I yelled. But before I could turn back, the room plunged into darkness. The door slammed shut behind me, locking me inside as the whispers tore through the silence, a symphony of cries begging for release. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud, thick and suffocating. I stumbled backward, my hands frantically searching for a wall, anything to steady myself. The whispers grew louder, spinning into a chaotic chorus that rattled my bones. "Cora, we need you." It felt like they were inside my head, echoing thoughts I didn't want to hear. "Stop, just stop," I shouted into the void, my voice barely breaking through the hushed clamor. Silence followed, a heavy pause that sent my heart racing faster than before. I strained my ears, hoping for any sign of the familiar voice, but it was only me and the oppressive dark. Suddenly, a flicker of light punctured the shadows, revealing the room's ghastly details. Rusted metal beams twisted overhead, and broken furniture lay strewn about, remnants of whatever life once thrived here. A musty smell filled the air, the scent of decay lurking in the corners. That's when I saw it, a faint glow emanating from what looked like a mirror hanging crooked on the wall. I crept closer, compelled by an instinct I couldn't ignore. The glass was murky, but as I approached, the surface rippled, distorting my reflection. The face staring back was not just mine. It morphed, twisting into the gaunt figure I'd seen before, its hollow eyes staring back at me. Panic surged again. I stumbled back, my breath quickening. "This can't be real," I gasped, the weight of realization crashing over me. "Cora, why do you resist?" The voice echoed again, but this time it was softer, almost pleading. "You know who we are." I shook my head. "No!" I shouted, but doubts began to creep in. I felt pulled to the mirror like it was a portal to a truth I didn't want to face. "Cora, remember," the voices whispered, weaving in and out, a haunting promise of revelation. What was there to remember? My knees felt weak, and I pressed my back against the wall for support. That's when the reflection shifted. A glimpse of another room flashed behind me in the mirror, a living scene of families gathered around a table, their faces illuminated by warm light. It felt like home, but then it faded, replaced by the eerie image of an empty hall filled with shadows. My pulse raced as I realized I wasn't alone. Shadows danced at the edges of the radiant glow, blooming with sinister intent. "Leave! Now!" I yelled, standing tall against the creeping anxiety. But the shadows grew bolder, crawling closer. In a wild moment of desperation, I hurled my fist at the mirror. The surface shattered, sending shards flying everywhere. Each piece reflected fractured images of my past alongside those haunted faces. The air turned electric, shocking my skin. Then everything went dark again. I felt a rush of cold air brush past me, and the whispers turned into wails, echoing around the void. Panic swallowed me whole. "What do you want from me?" I screamed. But my words dissolved into the relentless darkness. Before I could move, a new sound cut through, the unmistakable sound of someone breathing. I froze, the unmistakable warmth of another presence filling the room. "You've come to finish," it rasped. My heart dropped. I couldn't even begin to fathom what that meant, but I knew I had to escape. The urgency pulsed through me. Someone was here and I had to find a way out, before it chose me. The moment I heard the rasping voice, a jolt of fear shot through me. I wanted to run, to find the door I was sure would lead me out of this nightmare, but my legs felt like lead. The darkness continued to thicken around me, clinging like cobwebs. Panic seemed to amplify the whispering, the disembodied voices weaving in and out of my thoughts. "Finish what?" I managed to stammer, every syllable soaked in trembling dread. The figure from the mirror loomed closer, a shadow with no shape, only a pair of deep-set eyes that glinted with malice. It was as if my heartbeat echoed in the stillness, drawing the presence near. "Cora," it breathed again, the name lingering in the air, wrapping around me. It wasn't a question, more like a command, as if the very sound of my name meant something significant to it. I chanted a mantra in my head, desperate not to show fear. But with each breath I took, the air grew colder. I spun around, searching for light, for an exit that must be within reach. My fingers brushed the crumbling walls, my nails scraping against rusted metal. Then I heard it, a soft thud like footsteps pressing against the broken floorboards behind me. I whipped back around, ready to confront whatever was hunting me, but there was nothing but emptiness. No one stood there, but the dark still felt alive. The mirror shards lay scattered on the ground, reflecting tiny fragments of my world. Somehow they drew me in. I felt an urge to piece together their shimmering mosaic, to find out what lay beyond my fractured reality. Each shard caught a glimpse of my past, twisting memories into shadows that danced just out of reach. As I knelt to collect one of the fragments, I noticed a faint engraving on its edge. A name. Lucas. A name I knew all too well. Confusion washed over me. Why was Lucas here? Behind each reflection it flickered, an image of him beckoning, his face distorted like the figures in my dreams. The atmosphere shifted, growing heavier as if the room itself held its breath. I remembered that cold night when Lucas had vanished, how his absence twisted into the very fabric of my being, making me feel like I was losing pieces of myself. I had thought I was searching for him all along, but now, standing in this room with shadows urging me onward, maybe they wanted me to remember more. In the corner of my eye, I spotted movement. A shape darted across the darkness, heading toward the far wall. My heart lurched as I realized it wasn't just my imagination. Something was here. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound brave, but deep inside I was terrified. No response followed, only the soft patter of what felt like claws across tattered linoleum. Whatever it was closing in. I had to move. My instinct kicked in. I bolted toward where I thought the door might be, ignoring the piercing whimpers surrounding me. I glanced back, catching one last image before I left the room. A face that resembled Lucas, but its features twisted grotesquely. A smile that promised mischief and malice. My breath came heavy now, panic flooding me as the realization hit. I wasn't just running from the darkness. Something darker was searching for me as well. Something that bore a twisted link to those I had lost. And no matter how far I ran, it felt like it would always be a breath away. As I burst through the door, the shadows echoed behind me, whispering my name. I staggered into the next room, praying it held the answers I needed, but only uncertainty awaited me. The room I stumbled into was dimly lit, the only light filtering through grimy windows that were clouded with dust. My heart raced as I scanned the unfamiliar surroundings, a mix of dread and curiosity tightening my chest. I needed to figure out my next move, and fast. Boxes were stacked haphazardly against the walls, their contents spilling out like forgotten memories. Old photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings, and broken toys lay strewn about, remnants of lives once lived here. I picked up a photograph, my fingers trembling as I examined the faces. Smiling, happy, but utterly unrecognizable. They felt like echoes from a past I did not belong to. But I didn't have time to get lost in nostalgia. That feeling of being watched pressed down on me, dark and suffocating. I was still aware of the presence trailing close behind. The whispers from the previous room echoed in my mind, filling me with dread. Cora. I took a hesitant step forward, then another, trying to navigate the clutter without making a sound. Just as I began to feel a sliver of hope, a loud crash sliced through the silence, rattling the boxes. I spun around, ready to confront whatever had come for me, but only shadows greeted my gaze. My pulse quickened. It felt like a warning, a sign that I was on the brink of something unsettling. Then, a low growl. It echoed in the corners of the room, reverberating like a heartbeat in my ears. I couldn't tell if it was coming from just outside the door or deeper within the shadows. I held my breath, waiting, my instincts screaming at me to run. In the jumble of memories and noise, I noticed something odd near the back wall. A small door, slightly ajar, set into the crumbling plaster. The shadows swirled around it, drawing me in. Maybe it led to a way out, or possibly to answers I desperately needed. I took a slow, careful step towards it, my heart pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. As I reached the door, I noticed more engravings, similar to the shard I had found earlier. Cryptic symbols surrounded the edges, weaving together in a way that felt unwelcoming. I hesitated, feeling the temperature drop around me like a winter chill. It was as if the room itself was warning me to keep away. But the growl came again, closer this time. A deep guttural sound that resonated in my bones. That was all the encouragement I needed. I had to see what lay beyond. With a shaky hand, I pushed the door open. It creaked ominously as it revealed a narrow, dark passage that seemed to stretch into oblivion. I stepped through, the air thickening, suffocating. Behind me, something skittered, nails scraping against the floorboards like fingernails on a chalkboard. The moment I crossed the threshold, the whispers intensified, merging into a haunting symphony that called my name. Cora. They swirled around me, a chorus of the lost and the forgotten, urging me to remember something I couldn't quite grasp. Just as I was about to pull back, my foot caught on a loose board, sending me stumbling deeper into the passage. I gasped as I steadied myself, bracing for whatever else awaited. That's when I saw it, a glimmer among the darkness, something that looked like a mirror but reflected nothing. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized it wasn't just a mirror, it was a portal, and the recognition hit me like a wave. I knew that whatever lay beyond was deeply connected to Lucas, to all the people I had lost. Right then, the growl turned into a snarl, and that thing lurking in the shadows was ready to claim me. As the darkness crept in closer, I had a choice to make. I could either step into the unknown or face whatever was behind me. But there was no escape from the whispers pulling me toward the very thing that had haunted my dreams. I plunged forward, my heart hammering as I sprinted into the darkness. The narrow passage twisted and turned, seemingly endless, pressing in around me like a tightening noose. The echoes of Cora rippled through the corridor, a haunting melody that compelled me forward, but also filled me with relentless dread. My mind raced as I envisioned the reflection I had seen before, the mirror that had held not just my image, but the visage of a life intertwined with shadows. Part of me wanted to turn back, to flee from whatever darkness had tainted this place, but with every footfall I felt more trapped, more entwined with whatever illusion this was becoming. Then I spotted it, a light flickering like a distant star piercing through the oppressive gloom. I stumbled toward it, the whispers growing louder, urging me to take that final step. "Help me, Cora." A voice broke through the murmur and I froze, recognition coursing through me. It didn't belong to the shadows. It belonged to Lucas. I felt a jolt in my chest, a mix of fear and longing that drove me to the edge of frenzy. I couldn't ignore it. I pushed forward and emerged into a small, dimly lit room. The light was coming from a circular mirror mounted on the wall, encircled by a tangle of vines that seemed to pulse like living tendrils. Within its depths swirled images, a tapestry of faces, moments from the past, some familiar, some utterly foreign. I stepped closer, entranced. As I approached the mirror, a vision exploded within it. Lucas smiling, laughing, surrounded by friends, including another figure I recognized. My childhood neighbor, Emily, who had vanished years ago. They were alive, celebrating, their joy radiating through the glass. My heart twisted with both elation and despair. A part of me longed to join them, to step forward into that stitched-together past. But the swirling shadows began to shift, dark tendrils creeping closer, whispering once more, "Cora, come back." The voices were insistent, unsettling. I tore my gaze from the mirror, the allure of reclaiming lost connections battling with the pressing urgency of survival. Suddenly, the shadows surged, and the growling returned, closer, more aggressive now. Panicking, I whipped from the mirror's light, searching for an escape. Behind me, the shadows coalesced into a figure, its hollow eyes locking onto mine with a fierce hunger. Time slowed as I turned to run, stumbling across clutter, and a loud crash echoed behind me as the entity slammed against the wall. "Cora, help us!" The voices swirled and intertwined, their cries filling my ears, too desperate to ignore. They pleaded with me, each voice a small echo of the past, but I could feel the darkness closing in, the weight of loss consuming the air. Glimpses of Emily and Lucas flitted through my mind, their faces indistinguishable among the noise. Desperation clawed at my throat. I refused to let myself be consumed. With a surge of determination, I whirled back to the mirror, clutching the emotions of the memories I could not abandon. In one swift motion, I shouted, "I can't help you." The sound erupted like a war cry, cutting through the whispers. "I won't be pulled back." At that moment, the mirror's image rippled violently, and the shadows recoiled, their howls mixing into an agonized pitch. With adrenaline coursing through me, I reached for the mirror, feeling the heat radiating from the surface. I couldn't change the past, but I could decide to push through the wall of memories that bound me here. "I choose to escape," I yelled, and with that declaration I drove my hand into the mirror's surface. Light erupted, blinding me as I was pulled through, pain and euphoria mingling in an overwhelming rush. I shut my eyes tight against the brightness, surrendering to whatever awaited on the other side. When I opened them again, I found myself lying on the cold, hard floor of the mill. The air was different, scattered debris around me, dust motes swirling in sunlight streaming through the broken windows. I was back. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, breath coming in shaky bursts. The silence that enveloped me was disorienting. I looked around, dread pooling in my stomach. Had I truly escaped, or was it merely a pause in the chaos? In the quiet, I heard faint whispers lingering in the corners of the room. Cora. It was softer now, less demanding, more akin to a distant memory. I shivered, the weight of loss settling onto my shoulders. Feeling suddenly small, I stepped toward the exit, hesitating before pushing the door open. The light from outside felt warm, welcoming, but I glanced back one last time. Would I ever truly understand what had stayed behind? As I stepped into the brightness, I took a deep breath. The shadows faded behind me, but I still heard their echoes whispering through the air. I moved on, heart heavy but lighter in spirit, knowing I had escaped, yet forever tied to the remnants of what could never be. I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I feel like a piece of me was left behind in that mill, the faces of those I'd known still lingering at the edges of my heart. But mostly, I try not to think about it.